It would be safe to say that the last thing our new government expected at the start of 2020, flush with enthusiasm for its domestic agenda, was a foreign policy crisis, much less so one sprung upon it by the reaction of the mercurial Trump administration.But in truth, the drone strike on Iran's regional meddler-in-chief, General Qassem Soleimani, in Baghdad last week by the US should have been entirely understandable to our leaders, even if not predictable. Soleimani, the commander of the elite Qods Force of the Islamic Revolutionary Guards Corps, had his fingerprints over all manner of Iranian interventions in the Middle East over the past 2 decades, including the deaths and maiming of British soldiers in Iraq through terrorist activities under his influence. His hand had been detected in the ramping up of Iranian regional aggression in the past 6 months, including the attempted paralysis of Saudi Arabia's oil infrastructure, the hijacking of a British ship in the Gulf, and recent Iranian-organised provocations in Iraq. It was the last of these, an assault on the U.S. Embassy in Baghdad, which appears to have been the proximate trigger for a swift U.S. response allied to intelligence that further attacks on U.S. personnel were being planned. For Soleimani, who knew full well given the line of terrorism he engaged in that every trip out of Iran might be his last, crossing this red line under a president determined to restore the idea of U.S. deterrence proved to be a fatal misjudgment. The most puzzling aspect of the whole affair has been the reaction of sections of the media and intelligentsia in the West to the death of a thug. A talented thug perhaps, but the henchman to an odious regime responsible for domestic human rights abuses, the recent murder of hundreds of its own citizens protesting against it, and untold misery to millions in its region owing to its interventions in Iraq, Lebanon and its propping up of the barbarous Assad regime in Syria. The New York Times wrote up such a glowing account of Soleimani's life that one social media wag suggested it read like a Tinder profile. Others have variously breathlessly compared him to James Bond and Lord Nelson, with the idea taking root that the U.S. action was somehow equivalent to a successful Iranian attempt to kill the chairman of the U.S. Joint Chiefs of Staff. It is not in the slightest. There can be no moral equivalence between the killing of one of the icons of international terrorism and a military leader of a democracy with legal, judicial and political controls. Nor should we accept that Iranian ambitions are legitimate, even if they are rational. This situation has, however, seemingly placed British diplomacy into a bind. The UK is being sniped at from all sides for attempting to push for European-favoured de-escalation of the crisis while at the same time, if somewhat slowly, for more on this story, visit the news article link.